Hello, and welcome to Capital Insight. I'm State Representative Kevin Mannix from Salem, and I'm your host for this program, which is designed to give us all a little bit more insight about the doings at the Capitol, the goings-on, the people, the personalities, and all of that. Our guest today is Representative Eileen Qutub. Welcome to Capital Insight.
Well, thank you for having me.
Instead of me telling the audience about you, I thought it'd be best for you to tell us a little bit about you, but part of the idea of the show is to get a little insight into the personality of some of the political folks that we hear about. You're a new member of the House of Representatives, but where do you come from, after all?
Well, actually, I represent House District 8, which is Beaverton, suburb of Portland area. Beaverton, Raleigh Hills, and Garden Home. Those are all areas outside of Portland, Oregon. And I'm primarily a native of Oregon, although I was born in York, Nebraska. We moved here when I was 2 years old, so I barely remember actually being born in York, in Nebraska.
Which part of Oregon did you live in? Where'd you move to?
We lived in Portland, then we moved to Boring, Oregon, which is outside of Gresham, the Gresham area and Sandy. Later then, we did move across the river to the Vancouver area. So I also lived across the river in Vancouver, Washington.
Now, tell us a little bit about your schooling, where you went to high school or whatever.
Actually, I graduated from Battleground High School, again, which is across the river in Washington. But I graduated from George Fox College. I went back to college as an adult, and so I just recently graduated from George Fox.
In terms of family, can you share a little bit of that information with us?
Yeah, my husband and I have a combined family of 5 children. They're all adult children and out of the nest. So I've been able to raise those kids and send them off on their merry ways. And let's see, 3 of them are actually still in college. I have a daughter at the University of Portland, a son that's still at PCC, and another son that's at Columbia University.
Now, in terms of combining family obligations, you mentioned how the kids are basically grown up. Is your husband involved at all in your politics? Or?
He was tremendously involved in getting me to this point, and he stays involved where he can, but he doesn't involve himself in a way to try to have undue influence on me. He'll tell me what he thinks, but he's very supportive of my being here. He realizes that it's a time in our lives when I don't have to be with a family any longer because the children are gone, and he continues to support me by his work. So it is an opportunity for me to serve here, and he is very supportive of the role I'm playing at this time.
Well, I'm curious about how this would have worked for you during the campaign and how you got into politics, because you did challenge a Republican incumbent, and you are, of course, a Republican. So this was a primary challenge, not the general election. What drew you to politics in the first place?
It was a combination of things, but it has not been any lifelong desire or ambition of mine to be in politics. But it came about through observing the whole process, actually watching what was going on the national level and then again at the state level. And I really sensed, as well as some other people that I talked to about politics and our stands on different issues, that people that were serving maybe were just a little bit out of touch with their constituency, or at least we didn't feel maybe that they listened quite as much when we told them what we wanted. And I think that was the first thing that really drew me into the process. And I will say that at one point I was taking a political science class in state and local government, and one day the light just went off. I saw so many pictures of women in this book that told me, women really can be involved in politics and have a real voice. And I think women do add a certain balance. I don't think they're any better or any worse. I just think that they do add a nice balance to the political scene.
So when did you make a decision that you would run for the Oregon legislature, the Oregon House of Representatives?
I made that decision probably a year prior to my announcing that I was going to run.
And had you already taken a look at the incumbent representative?
Yes, I had, yeah.
And I don't want to be too pushy, but I assume that you weren't pleased and decided it was time to challenge this person?
That's exactly right.
Well, how did it feel? I mean, as a Democrat, my observation would be that Republicans tend to be a little bit more, I don't say cliquish, but tight about their own kind, if I can say that. Yeah. And how would it feel to be a Republican running against a Republican incumbent in the primary?
Well, I'll tell you, Kevin, how it felt was I needed to have grassroots support, and I did not run without first talking to a lot of people who really did feel that it was warranted and that I would be a good candidate and could fill the position. And really, although I made the decision a year before I actually announced it, I didn't go around announcing it. I just knew myself that I was going to be running. I was busy going to school and holding down a full-time job, so there wasn't a whole lot that I could do toward running for office. But what I did do is where I could drop a little seed, I dropped a seed to see how people felt about it. And then when I did decide to run, I did not have the main machinery, so to speak, behind me. It was basically a total grassroots effort, and it ended up being a tremendous effort.
Well, with the primary campaign and your defeat of the incumbent, so that you were now on the ballot as a Republican candidate, did the party machinery come to your aid, or were you still sort of out there?
It did eventually. I still had to do a little bit of work, but yes, they did. They did get behind me, finally, when I...
How did you find the fall campaign compared to the primary campaign?
I actually thought that my fall campaign would be an easier campaign. I was told all along, oh, the primary will be the tough campaign. And it was tough, but the fall campaign was grueling.
Was that because of the issues or the personalities, or can you give us some idea, or just the time frame? Give us some idea what that means.
I think it was probably all of the above. There were people actually, probably some people who were disappointed that I took the primary, even though I did take it by 59% in a three-way race. So I did get a great majority of people.
Now, let's get that clear. You got 59% of the vote, and you had two other people, including the incumbent, on the ballot.
Yes, I did. So
pretty good.
Yep. I thought so. And I was very pleased by that, of course. I mean, it was great to be rewarded for all the work that had gone on.
Did you find you'd have to shift your emphasis, though? I mean, with the general election, you're trying to reach independents and
Exactly.
Democrats.
There did need to be a little bit of... well, I didn't really shift the emphasis, though. I still went with my same message, and the message is that I think crime, the issue of crime, played a large part. People are just really fed up with what's happening in the criminal justice system. Education and having adequate funding for education, as well as having the results from our educational system that people would like to see. And then taxes. Holding the line on taxes. Maybe not being able to reduce them at this point in time, but trying to make government run a little bit more efficiently. And I have served in the public sector, and I've also owned a small business myself, but having served in the public sector, I am very well aware that there are places that government can be more efficient. And so when we're able to do that, I just felt like that was one area that I really wanted to try to help in, making government more efficient.
Well, I'll pause for a moment and mention to our audience that you're with us on Capital Insight. I'm State Representative Kevin Mannix from Salem, and I'm your host for this program. Our guest today is Representative Eileen Qutub. If you ever have any questions or concerns, I hope you feel free to write to me at Capital Insight, H395, State Capitol, 888-973-10. We're always happy to hear from you. And getting back to you, Representative Qutub, I'll call you Eileen if I may.
Oh, you may.
In terms of the work that you referred to, owning a business, can you tell us something about that?
Actually, it was a service-oriented business. It was a hair salon. I employed 8 people, and it was in the Beaverton area, and I owned that business for about 5.5 years. So
you definitely had your feet planted in the private sector with
yes,
that.
I did.
Then you mentioned you had public sector work.
Right. I later got my license to sell real estate. I sold residential real estate for a time, and then I went to work for a municipality as a right-of-way agent, and I negotiated for public property like fire stations and that sort of thing. Later became an appraiser for that same entity, and by the way, that was in Charlotte, North Carolina. My husband works for Freightliner Corporation, a large corporation here in Oregon, and was transferred to Charlotte, North Carolina. So at that point in time, I did go to work for the city of Charlotte there.
Now, you're not going to get transferred again, are you?
No, we are not. He knows that I have a duty here.
We have residence requirements.
That's right. No, we won't get transferred. That was kind of a fluke, actually. Freightliner is based in Oregon. Their home base here is Oregon, and they opened a technical center in North Carolina, so there was an opportunity to go. At any rate, I became a real estate appraiser there, a staff appraiser in Charlotte, but when we moved back, I went into a different line of appraisal, and that was assessment appraisal. So I've also worked in a tax office as a tax assessor. So
shouldn't we have you working on all the bills that have to do with the assessment process and the appraisers and everything? Or does that come through the Judiciary Committee?
There are some that have come through the Judiciary Committee, and I think that having held a position like that, it does give me a little bit of insight.
Well, let's talk about your committee assignments. I mean, you got elected in November, and having defeated an incumbent in the primary, then you went on and you dealt with a Democratic challenger, and you won the November election. Then you came in January as one of the new members of the House of Representatives with a Republican majority. There's also a Republican majority in the Senate, and of course we have our Democratic governor. In this process, you got appointed to, I know, the Judiciary Committee and also the Public Safety Subcommittee of Ways and Means.
Yes.
Are there any other committee appointments?
Well,
that's pretty heavy right there.
Right. I have been named as one of the assistant majority leaders. I've been assigned to the Sexual Harassment Committee, so if that comes up, I will be serving on that committee. I've been appointed to the Women's Commission. I'm appointed to the Statutory Commission on of Legal Counsel.
Legislative Counsel?
Legislative Counsel, excuse me. And I think
that group will be more active during the interim of the Legislative Counsel Committee, which is a statutory committee. I'm curious, with all of these committee assignments and appointments, is that something that surprised you, the number of duties or jobs you would be assigned as a representative?
I really had the idea that I would be busy many hours a day, and that is true.
Well, let's talk about that. You're in your first term, and we're now into May, and a lot of people probably think that the legislators just sit around and sip tea. Well, what's been your experience as a new legislator?
It is a very large workload, and if anybody thinks we sit around and sip tea, they're wrong. If you're going to be diligent about the job that you do and you're going to do a good job, that means that you have to read the legislation that you're going to be voting on and having hearings on, and that is a great responsibility, and it takes a lot of time. So generally, I'm at the office about 7 in the morning and leave around 6. Some nights I'm here much longer. I've been here till 9:30. I've been in the office till 9:30 or 10 sometimes. But now I am staying in Salem more often. I do have a small apartment that I go to, so I can bring some of my work home and actually read it instead of spending 2 hours commuting back and forth. So that has helped for me to get some of my work done. But you can't just forget your constituents either. I mean, you have to be in contact with your constituents both by responding to their phone calls, responding to their mail, and then having in district activities. So It's a large job description.
Well, we probably ought to get more testimonials from new legislators to convince people that those of us been around for a little while are not taking it easy.
Yeah.
But now, as a member of Judiciary, now people always think of Judiciary Committee, well, that must be a bunch of lawyers, but you're not an attorney, and some of the other members of that committee are not attorneys. Can you tell us a little bit about your reaction to being on this committee that deals with criminal law and civil law and judges and all of that?
Okay. First of all, I asked, that was my first choice to be on Judiciary because those issues are important to me. I find that I just have a real interest in that area, and I also think one of the things I told the Speaker of the House when I told her some of the committees that I would like to serve on was that I thought maybe some common sense, and I'm not saying that those with legal background don't have common sense at all. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that sometimes a perspective of somebody who's not been in that arena maybe has something to contribute. And my reaction has been, wow, now I know why you need an attorney to go to court. Laws are written in ways that they have to be so carefully read and interpreted, and that's why with the passage of laws, it's such a great responsibility for legislators to read what they're doing and to really listen to the hearing that goes on, because I think there's a lot of insight given when you actually have somebody come up and testify on certain bills, because they give you both sides of the issue, what the repercussions of any particular piece of legislation might have.
Now, you and I are both on the Public Safety Subcommittee of the Ways and Means Committee. Ways and Means is the Money Appropriations Committee. It's a joint committee, the House and Senate, and so the subcommittees have House and Senate members. Now, you're a member of the subcommittee, but not of full Ways and Means. How do you feel about that process, combining that with your service on the Judiciary Committee?
Well, I think it's excellent. It's an excellent opportunity for me to be on a substantive committee and also be able to be on a committee that decides where some of that money is going to go. It goes hand in hand, and I'm very honored that that kind of responsibility would be given to me.
Do you have any strong impressions thus far about how we are handling the money in the appropriations process, on the public safety side at least, where you're involved?
I think we're scrutinizing the budgets fairly closely, and hopefully we're doing a very good job.
People complain sometimes saying, oh, we're spending too much money on crime and public safety as opposed to, say, education, although we have passed a $3.55 billion education, just K through 12 appropriation. What is your reaction to that complaint?
Well, my reaction is that's not really what I've heard a lot of. Maybe the most vocal voices that we hear are, we need to put more money into education. And so we hear that long and often here as we're in Salem. But having gone door to door, and by the way, that is the way I believe that I won both of these races, and I went to literally thousands of doors. I got a different message, and that message was, we want public safety. That's one of the legitimate expenses that government can appropriate money for, and we want to be protected as citizens, and so we don't mind so much that you spend on that. So I don't feel one bit guilty about putting criminals behind bars and spending money in that area.
Are there particular issues that have developed as you've served on the Judiciary Committee that were new to you? I mean, I'm not talking about the detail stuff. A lot of that is new, but broad issues that you first felt exposed to on the Judiciary Committee?
Do you mean money-wise or just issues of any kind?
New angles to issues, or I know when I first served on Judiciary in the '89 session, while I was ready for it, in a way I wasn't. I was surprised at the number of technical, detailed issues that got presented.
That's what I would have said too, is that I serve on the subcommittee of Civil Law and Judicial Administration, and it is amazing to me how technical the courts, the laws are. I mean, that is a surprise to me.
Do you think that they should be less technical? Or?
Absolutely, I do think they should be less technical, because the way they are, as I said to you just a little while ago, is that you need an attorney to do just about anything, to help you fill out a form.
Is that because we have some sort of a tendency to want to put everything into writing and have very specific prescriptions for everything, instead of saying, for instance, well, judge, do the right thing? We used to have equity courts. The idea was, you know, just do the right thing and give the judge a lot of power. Now it's all very carefully circumscribed. Everything has to be in writing and every little detail. Well, I shouldn't say it has to be, but it seems to be. What's your reaction to all of that?
Well, my reaction to that is maybe the past climate has brought that about, where perhaps a more liberal approach to making these decisions was taken. And by more liberal, I mean maybe the judges or who is given this ability to make this broad decisions weren't making them very well, and therefore, you know, lawmakers thought they needed to be more detailed about the kind of information. But my general feeling about it is that we should do less of that. I think that we need to get back to a little bit more of a system where the general public understands it and could, if they needed to, defend themselves. I don't think that's possible. I mean, some people do it and say that it's possible. They think that it's possible, and I may have naively thought that was possible too until I actually served on this committee.
What do you think in terms of this process? A couple of perceptions. One is, what do you like the most about the legislative process, if there is one thing that you seem to have enjoyed the most since this session started?
I think one of the things that I like the most and maybe surprises me the most is the great respect I have for really all of the legislators that are here on a personal basis, even though you disagree with them on some policy issues and that sort of thing. I have great respect for really for all of the people that I'm serving with. And I think it's great that we can get along, that we can agree to disagree. I also like the fact that even though it is difficult sometimes maybe to get your legislation through, the whole process is designed so that not everybody gets their way every time they want it. And I think that's good.
In a way, it sort of protects us from government
Sure
in the
does.
sense that the legislature cannot easily enact a law.
Right. That's right.
When you think about, well, I'm going to ask you the other side of what is something, or there may be more than one thing there, but that you really don't like about the legislative process?
Well, it can be very frustrating and challenging when you see something that seems very clear and clear to me and the right thing to do, and you don't seem to be able to get that accomplished. And that can happen on, even within your own party. I'm sure that the Democrats have the same kind of difficulty because we're dealing with a group of people that are individuals, and they have their own individual way of thinking. So it can be frustrating.
How do you react to the sense of partisanship, party politics in the legislative process?
Well, I think it's inevitable. I think it's inevitable. And how do I react to it? Well,
do you
it's
like
a fact
it? Do you
of
think? Do you think we ought to try to change it? Go for a nonpartisan legislature or something like that?
No. I think it's okay. Obviously, I think what it does is the two-party system has been around, and I think people sort of go into each party because they have sort of a philosophical bent, and when you belong to a certain party, you sort of go along that philosophical thought process. So, I mean, if it could be, that would be fine. I just don't think that it's. I don't think that it would really happen. And I think that what it does, I don't think gaining consensus is always the best thing. I mean, I don't think that's necessarily what we're supposed to do, and that might sound funny, and we may not have enough time to even go into that. But, you know...
Are there some issues where they're going to have to be winners and losers?
Yes, I believe so. I believe so.
Let me pause for a moment and just mention to our audience that you're with us on Capital Insight. I'm Representative Kevin Mannix from Salem, your host, and our guest is Representative Eileen Qutub. And yes, that's the way you pronounce your name. If you're wondering about the spelling, it is pronounced Qutub. If you ever have any questions or concerns, feel free to write to me at Capital Insight, H395, State Capitol, Salem, Oregon, 97310. And again, we're always happy to hear from you. Well, we were just talking about, well, contentious issues. Don't you see some sort of a reluctance on the part of some of the leadership to get to divisive votes?
Yes.
You want to elaborate on that?
Well, I think they want to avoid the conflict that happens simply because this is a process where we don't always get our ways on less contentious issues, on fairly simple issues, but we just disagree. But as we go along, as we move along in this process, more and more people are sort of becoming disappointed maybe that they didn't get their legislation through. And then along comes a really controversial issue. I think leadership sometimes wants to avoid those controversial issues because we're already somewhat have butted heads on other things. Maybe if they came up early in the process, it wouldn't be so difficult.
Would it be fair? But of course, the leadership tends to put off some of the controversial
Right.
things till the end.
Right.
Do you ever think that there might be a method in that madness, in the sense that, well, people will be so battle-weary that they won't want to push those issues?
I guess so. That's very possible.
And I don't think that that's necessarily Republicans versus Democrats. I
No.
think anybody in charge might think that way.
That's true.
Well, if you had a chance to change something tomorrow in the legislative process, is there something you would change, and could you tell us what it would be?
Probably, I might think about changing the power that committee chairmen have. Committees have tremendous power, and the committee chairs have tremendous power, and I don't, that probably is the thing that surprised me the most, not being that close to the system before and knowing.
We should explain that in the sense that committee chairs decide whether a bill gets a hearing, whether it gets a work session, and in so doing really decide the life or death of legislation.
That's exactly right.
And it's very hard for the committee members to overcome the desire of the chair one way or another.
That's right.
And under the current system, you really have to get the leadership to intervene to force an issue if a committee chair doesn't want to do it. They're like the lords of the manor.
That's right. And I think that could change.
Would
just
you
a little.
empower the committee members perhaps at some point to just say, we will hear this bill?
I think that's what I would do. Allow a little bit more democracy, so to speak, in a committee.
Now, once the bill's in the committee members get to play with it, so to speak, but determining what gets played with is
Right.
the key.
That's right. The committee chair chooses all of those bills that come to his or her committee. They look at them and say, do I want to have this heard? And if they don't, it isn't. And
Pretty simple, huh?
pretty simple.
But not very pretty.
No.
Well, let me ask you one more question as we're going along here. Have you thought about whether you're going to run for re-election? Would you like to address that issue?
I guess what I would like to do is finish this session and not think too much about that. I wouldn't want that decision to play too much in how I make decisions on my votes. I really want to be representing the people of my district and voting my conscience whenever, or all the time, not whenever I can, all the time. And, but very possibly, I think that I've served my constituency well, and so I probably will run again.
All right. Well, it sounds like a matter for your conscience and your constituents.
Right.
Thank you for joining us on the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Kevin.
And thank you to our audience for joining us on Capital Insight. We'll see you again next time.